The mountain and wild village girl also has the ambition to soar above the clouds. Our female cultivators strive for self-improvement. This is the story of local cultivators, and it is the struggle history of ordinary people. No rebirth, no books, no golden fingers. Yes, it's just that unwavering belief and determination. Keywords of the novel. Our female cultivation and self-strengthening without pop-ups, our female cultivation and self-strengthening complete collection download, our female cultivation and self-strengthening latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Entering the outer door. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Entering the outer door. Su Chuanyang, with 3 spiritual roots of water, wood, and soil, has moderate aptitude and has entered the outer gate of the Xiaoyao sect. Su Chuanyang remained dazed until she boarded the fairy's flying boat, unable to believe everything. She actually passed the immortal's assessment. Su Chuanyang fiercely tugged at her thigh, causing her to grin in pain. However, her eyes became even brighter, and all of this was truly true. She passed the assessment and will no longer have to go hungry. She even has a chance to learn the skills of immortals. At the moment of her excitement, she heard a malicious voice coming from behind. Where did the dirty beggar come from? He even sat with us, it's really unlucky. Upon hearing the sound, Su Chuanyang looked up and saw that the speaker was a little girl about the same size as her. The little girl was dressed in luxurious clothes, very beautiful and dignified, and at first glance, she was either wealthy or noble. She tilted her gaze, with an undisguised disdain and condescending disdain in her eyes, as if she had seen something dirty. Su Chuanyang was fiercely stabbed by such a gaze, and she instinctively avoided it and lowered her head. The person behind her refused to let her go easily. When he saw the birthmark on her face, he exclaimed in surprise, "You're still an ugly person. I don't know how such a person got in." Su Chuanyang clenched her lips tightly, tears swirling in her eyes. From childhood to adulthood, she had been laughed at countless times due to the red birthmark on her face, and even named Cho. However, there was no one more heartbreaking than this time. She was about to pass the immortal's assessment, thinking that her future life would improve, but this voice wiped out all her joy. It turns out that after passing the assessment, there is no difference from before, and people will still be scolded for being ugly. The other half-aged children all shrank their necks when they saw all this happening, as if they hadn't seen it. After all, the little girl in splendid attire had an extraordinary background at first glance, and no one was willing to take the risk of offending her to speak up for Su Chuanyang. The little girl in Huafu gave orders with a natural expression on her face, "Ugly, you go to the stern of the boat, and when I see your face, my eyes hurt." Wei Dao, who walked out of the cabin, heard these words and frowned slightly. His gaze fell on Su Chuanyang. The skinny little girl was wearing clothes that had been washed white, with a patched bundle on her back. She stood in embarrassment with her head down, unsure of what to do. Wei Dao is from Weijia village, which is adjacent to Shujia village. The two villages are close and have close ties. The ugly girl was bullied like this, and he couldn't bear it anymore. He turned his head and said calmly, "We will all be from the same family in the future. Isn't it good for you to bully people?" As if she hadn't expected someone to dare to confront her, Huang Fuyo was furious and her beautiful eyes became sharp. "Dare, do you know who I am? How dare you disobey my words?" Wei Dao, however, was not afraid of her and spoke calmly, "I don't care who you are. Anyway, we will all be members of the Xiaoyao sect in the future. It's not right for you to bully others." Huang Fuyo was still waiting to speak when the young master in the brocade beside her gave her a hand and whispered, "This person has just come out of the cabin, so he should be an inner disciple." The little girl in Huafu hesitated for a moment. In the Xiaoyao sect, the status of inner disciples and outer disciples can be said to be vastly different. She can shout and drink at outer disciples, but dare not apply this set to inner disciples. After all, she herself is still just an outer disciple, and if she wants to enter the inner sect, she still needs to ask her elder brother for help. It is not good to offend other disciples of the inner sect before entering. Huang Fuyo is just arrogant in temperament, but not foolish. She had an unpleasant expression on her face, glared at Su Chuanyang fiercely, and angrily turned around to the other side of the cabin. The young master beside her saw the situation and hurriedly followed her over. De Wu. Su Chuanyang looked up at Wei Dao and sniffed excitedly, "Thank you for speaking to me." She was really panicked just now. If she was bullied in the village, Su Chuanyang could scold and fight back, but this is not the village, it's on the fairy's flying boat. Su Chuanyang is just an 8-year-old village girl who knows nothing about the world of immortals. If she angers the immortals and doesn't want her, what should she do to drive her back to the Su family village? "Thank you for what?" Wei Dao shook his head. "We are people from the same place, and I am older than you. It's only right to help you. But in the future, I will become a disciple of the inner sect, and there will be differences between the inner and outer sections. I'm afraid I won't be able to take care of you." "Is there any difference between the inner door and the outer door?" Su Chuanyang asked curiously. Just now, the domineering little girl heard that De Wu Go might be a disciple of the inner sect, and immediately dared not trouble her. "This inner sect must be very powerful. I don't quite understand either. I only heard that those with good talents enter the inner sect. They say that the disciples in the inner sect have abundant cultivation resources, not only have the opportunity to apprentice, but also listen to the elders' lectures every day. The rest of the people can only enter the outer gate. The outer gate disciples are not talented, their status is not comparable to the inner gate disciples, and their treatment is also worse. However, as long as external disciples can cultivate and build foundations, they can enter the internal sect." Wei Dao spoke out the news he had heard in detail. "A talent like mine has dual spiritual roots and can usually enter the inner gate. For 3 spiritual roots, one can only enter the inner gate if the spiritual roots are very good. The 4 or 5 spiritual roots are too complex and chaotic, and cultivation is slow, usually unable to enter the inner gate." Su Chuanyang nodded in confusion and firmly recorded what Wei Dao had said. So, the fewer spiritual roots there are, the more powerful they are. She remembers when she just tested, the fairy said she was rooted in water, wood, soil, and spiritual elements. It wasn't very good, but it wasn't very bad either. In short, whether it's an inner or outer sect, our goal is to cultivate. Wei Dao comforted her by patting her head and saying, "Newly recruited disciples have a 3-year protection period. They should take advantage of these 3 years to learn their skills well. If they don't work hard, they may even be kicked out of the sect. Immortal sects should not waste their lives." Su Chuanyang nodded heavily, she must work hard to cultivate and not be kicked out by the sect. After Wei Dao explained some more words, he returned to the cabin again. After all, he was chosen to enter the inner door and it was not good for him to stay outside all the time. Su Chuanyang watched him leave with reverence, feeling much less nervous and uneasy in her heart. In the world of immortals, she has at least one acquaintance. If De Wu can do it, she can definitely do it too. After her mood relaxed, she felt a strong hunger. Su Chuanyang carefully took out a piece of dry cake from the bundle and bit into the white cake, her eyes slightly wet. "My family is very poor and almost unable to cook. My mother baked the last bit of white flour into pancakes and brought them all to her. Fortunately, after being selected by the immortal, he will give 100 taels of silver as a reward, which can be considered a huge wealth for the family. With this money, parents and younger siblings no longer have to go hungry, and they can even build a few spacious brick houses to tell their brother a good marriage." Su Chuanyang swallowed the cake and felt a little happy. Although she doesn't understand the world of immortals yet, being able to eat enough and earn money for her family is a great thing. However, De Wu Go said that her talent is average, she is just an outer disciple, and many people like De Wu Go who are as powerful have become inner disciples. A glimmer of determination flashed in Su Chuanyang's eyes. She would definitely practice well and become the foundation of Dawu's words as soon as possible, entering that inner gate. Hello Taoist friends, the new book is not easy, 1-click 3 requests. Please follow up, follow up, follow up. Don't put your favorites in the trash, even if you don't have time to read or fatten them up, please drag them to the last page of the latest chapter. Your follow-up is crucial, and the success of your work depends on you. Friends, help me. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Receiving materials. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Receiving materials. The flying boat traveled rapidly for 7 or 8 days and finally arrived at the Xiaoyao sect one morning. Along the way, senior brothers from the Xiaoyao sect had already informed these newcomers about the basic information of the cultivation world and the Xiaoyao sect, so Su Chuanyang is not completely ignorant now. Although I don't quite understand what it means to become an immortal through cultivation, I have some knowledge about the cultivation world. Perhaps due to Wei Dao, an inner disciple, Su Chuanyang had a very peaceful journey. The little girl who had previously troubled her entered the cabin the next day and never came out again. The young master in the brocade robe who had been following her all along was unable to enter the cabin, still staying outside like everyone else, fighting fiercely with others, as if he had become the leader. Due to Su Chuanyang's ugly appearance, no one else wanted to talk to her. Although she was isolated along the way, she still lived a peaceful life. The flying boat paused for a moment at the outer gate, lowered the outer disciples, and continued flying towards the inner gate. Su Chuanyang watched the direction of the flying boat's departure and silently encouraged herself in her heart. One day, she will also enter the inner door. The leading senior brother of the Xiaoyao sect led everyone into a large hall and smiled at a person who looked like a steward, saying, "Finally, we have safely brought back these new disciples. We have been surrounded by these little ghosts asking questions on the way." The steward glanced at him and a smile appeared on his face. "These disciples are quite good. Your contribution value for this mission should have earned quite a bit. That's all for now, it's quite time consuming." The leading senior brother smiled helplessly and turned to the others, saying, "This is the steward senior brother responsible for distributing resources to you during the protection period. You can collect all the supplies from this steward senior brother within the first 3 years of your entry. If you have any questions, please ask him." After speaking, the leading senior brother quickly left the hall as if he had put down his burden. The steward glanced at everyone with a smile on his face. "My name is Zhang Donglai, and I keep all the things of your new disciples here. You will have to deal with me for the next 3 years. For example, I will allocate the dormitories you will live in. The spiritual stones distributed by the sect every year are also distributed by me." The clever disciple immediately asked, "I don't know how to allocate this dormitory. What's the difference? It's up to me the final say how to distribute." Zhang Donglai chuckled and said, "You must have heard about it on your way here. Cultivation and spiritual energy are closely related. If you live in a good place with sufficient spiritual energy, it can help you go further on the path of cultivation." He paused for a moment before speaking slowly, "As long as you are willing to pay me 6 spirit stones, I will take care of it and choose a good spot for you." Someone suddenly took a deep breath and said, 6 spirit stones. But we don't have any. The quick-witted one immediately said, "Did you forget? Although we don't have it now, the senior brother mentioned before that our new disciples have a 3-year protection period, during which they can receive 12 spiritual stones subsidized by the sect every year." Everyone reacted and realized that Manager Zhang had actually come up with this idea. After being exposed by someone, Zhang Donglai's face showed no signs of abnormality, but still had the same smiling expression. "That's right. I will send you the basic supplies of the new disciple and the spiritual stone subsidy issued by the sect in the first year soon. As long as you pay 6 spiritual stones, I will choose a good position with sufficient spiritual energy for you. You should know that you will be staying in the dormitory for many years, and I only accept 6 spirit stones, which is already a reasonable price. For your new disciples, having 6 spirit stones in the first year is enough. And I won't collect the spirit stones for the next 2 years, I won't lose a single one from you. As he spoke, Zhang Donglai distributed palm-sized storage bags to everyone. This thing is called a storage bag, which contains the supplies sent by the sect and the first year's subsidy. This low-level storage bag can be used even if you haven't practiced it yet. Just press it close to your forehead to remove the spirit stone. Everyone tried the method taught by Zhang Dong and was able to extract something from it. This is the immortal's method, so powerful that he actually took something out of this small bag. In the future, as long as we work hard, we can also learn the skills of immortals. Su Chuanyang also followed Zhang Donglai's instructions and placed the storage bag close to her eyes, quickly seeing what was inside. There is a piece of clothing, a few books, a map, a black sign, and 12 shining stones, etc. Spending 6 spiritual stones and buying a good location would be good. Finally, someone was tempted and took out 6 sparkling stones from their storage bag, handing them over. Zhang Dong took the spirit stone, took out the map, pointed to a middle position, and said, "You go here." He then took out a large key from his storage bag and took a piece from it for him. The person glanced at the map and saw that it was indeed in a good location, and immediately nodded in satisfaction. With this person at the beginning, the others also followed suit and paid the protection fee of 6 spiritual stones, hoping that this steward could allocate a good position for themselves. But there are also some people who are not willing to pay these 6 spirit stones. After all, only 12 yuan are distributed in a year, and half of them are suddenly removed. A person gritted their heads and said, "Senior brother Zhang, can I not pay the spirit stone?" The smile on Zhang Donglai's face instantly subsided, revealing a shrewd and sarcastic expression. "Don't you pay the spirit stone? Hehe, I can only assign you to the worst dormitory, and you don't want to get any benefits from me anymore. You should know that the protection period for new disciples is only 3 years, and in 3 years, you will have to pay tribute to the sect. I am responsible for assigning the tribute tasks for you new disciples. I said ugly things earlier. If you don't want to hand over the spirit stone, don't blame me if you can't complete the tribute mission then." Zhang Dong paused for a moment and glanced at the disciples. Of course, if you have the ability, you can also entrust the main hall to take the task yourself. However, the task entrusted to the main hall requires at least a cultivation in the middle stage of Qi cultivation to take it. It's enough to break through to the 3rd level of Qi cultivation within 3 years. If you want to break through to the middle stage of Qi cultivation, The interviewer weighed the pros and cons, and if they don't pay these 6 spiritual stones, it will be a small matter to be assigned a poor dormitory. If they offend this steward because of this, it may even affect their future development. He hesitated for a moment, and finally counted 6 spirit stones from his storage bag to pay. Anyway, since so many people have already paid, he is not the only one left behind. The rest of the crowd saw this. Although they were a bit reluctant in their hearts, they were also prepared to pinch their noses and pay the spirit stone, treating it as a waste of money and disaster. Su Chuanyang held the newly distributed storage bag and frowned tightly. When on the flying boat, De Wugu told her that there was something called a spirit stone, which was very important in the world of immortals, equivalent to gold and silver in the secular world. Spirit stones can not only be used as money in the world of immortals, but also help with cultivation. In short, there are many benefits. Although she doesn't understand how to use this spirit stone specifically, judging from the fact that the sect only distributed 36 yuan to new disciples, it must be a very valuable thing. Su Chuanyang grew up to 8 years old and had never even touched silver, let alone a spirit stone that was much more valuable than silver. She is very struggling inside. Not paying the spirit stone would offend Manager Zhang, but she really can't bear to part with the 6 spirit stones. This is a 6-month subsidy for the new disciple. Manager Zhang's gaze fell on Su Chuanyang, and a hint of disgust flashed in his eyes. Hey, everyone else has paid for the spirit stone, and you're the only one left. Hurry up and hand over the spirit stone, he said unconsciously. Everyone paid for the spirit stone, including the young master named Xiaoyao Jue who was following the little girl in splendid attire. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Lingpi Valley Pill. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Lingpi Valley Pill. Su Chuanyang made up her mind to pay attention, as if she hadn't seen the disdain on Manager Zhang's face. After being scolded inexplicably by the little girl that day, she knew that although the world of immortals was very different from before, there were some places that were not much different. For example, they all detest her because of her ugly appearance. But she doesn't care. When she was young, all the children in the village called her ugly girl and even threw stones at her. However, after being repaired one by one with her deadly posture, they were all so honest that they dared not even speak loudly in front of her, at most cursing her from behind. She has a birthmark on her face, and what's wrong with her ugly appearance? As the leading senior brother said before, the cultivation world speaks with strength, and whoever has the biggest fist is the boss. She will definitely practice hard in the future, teach these people who look down on her a good lesson, and let them know the detestability of judging people by their appearance. A hint of impatience flashed on Zhang Donglai's face. Speaking to you, are you deaf or mute? Hurry up and hand over the spirit stone. I won't submit it. Su Chuanyang gritted her teeth and made a bold decision. Everyone else's dormitories have been arranged, and she is the last one. There are no good seats to choose from. What? You're not paying. Zhang Donglai squinted his eyes and said, have you made up your mind? A large number of spirit stones have been received, and he does not insist on these last 6 spirit stones. But if he dares to challenge his prestige, he will let this ugly girl know that it is not just a matter of a few spiritual stones. After making the decision, Su Chuanyang felt certain in her heart, not bad. I won't hand over the linkshare, please assign me a dormitory, senior brother steward. It's impossible to take out the spirit stone in her hand again. I really don't appreciate it. A chill flashed in Manager Zhang's eyes as he opened the map and pointed to the most remote location on the map. Since that's the case, then you can go to this dormitory near the back mountain. I kindly remind you that although the back mountain is safe, there may be some monsters around. If it's eaten by monsters, hee. Su Chuanyang's face turned a bit pale, but she didn't say anything at all. She took the key and clenched it tightly. Others, upon seeing this scene, felt a lot of comfort in their hearts, feeling that their spiritual stone had not been wasted at all. They had just made it clear that the location pointed out by Manager Zhang was not only close to the back mountain, but also to another hill. That area was just an independent dormitory, which was definitely the most remote and dangerous. It was inconvenient to think about it. The consul disciple on the flying boat once said that the new disciple has courses to learn when they first start, and the place they live in is so remote that it may take up a lot of time each time. Over time, the course will definitely fall behind. The disciples who paid the money first were even more fortunate. They paid the money first, so the allocation of positions was the best. Whether it was going to the teaching hall, the dining hall, or the transmission pavilion, it was very convenient. After Su Chuanyang took the key, she didn't look at the other people's gloating expressions and strode out of the hall. For her, it's not a big deal to have a longer distance, At best, she can walk a little longer. Just offended Manager Zhang. As soon as he arrived, Su Chuanyang shook her head and suppressed the unease in her heart. Anyway, she didn't have a good impression of herself. Even if she paid the spiritual stone, her situation wouldn't be much better. It would be more cost effective to keep the spiritual stone. Su Chuanyang put these things aside, took out the map from the storage bag, and glanced at the location of the dormitory. It's really off-center. Going further out, it's probably out of the range of the Xiaoyao sect. She hesitated for a moment and decided to go to the dining hall first. She was a bit hungry. I want to go eat something first, and then visit the teaching hall. On the way to the diet hall, Su Chuanyang couldn't help but feel excited. Starting today, she officially became an outer disciple of the Xiaoyao sect. Within 3 years of becoming a new disciple, the dining hall and teaching hall will be open to new disciples for free, and contribution points will be collected after 3 years. A few days ago, the pancakes and water she brought with her had already been consumed. The consul's senior brother issued a black pill, which was called the Pigu pill. As long as she took 1 pill a day, she would not be thirsty or hungry. She was still very skeptical at the time. How could she eat enough with just such a small one? Who knew she was so hungry that after eating one, she really wasn't hungry at all? These days on the flying boat, everyone has been eating pai gu dan. After eating the Pigu pill, although she didn't feel hungry anymore, Su Chuanyang always felt empty and not used to it. I don't know what delicious food is in this food hall, but it's not like the black pai gu dan, is it? There have always been few people on this side of the dining hall, but occasionally someone passes by, wearing a uniform blue robe and rushing back and forth. Su Chuanyang patted her head and, realizing it later, took out the blue robe issued by the sect from her storage bag, ready to change it. Although this outfit may seem too big at first glance, she is now an outsider of the Xiaoyao sect, so it's best for her to wear a uniform. Otherwise, she would be misunderstood as not a member of the sect, and if we were to drive her out, she would have no place to cry. A magical thing happened. Just as she put on her green clothes, the clothes gradually became smaller and eventually became very fitting, as if tailor-made. Su Chuanyang was extremely surprised. She didn't expect that a small piece of clothing could automatically change in size. It seemed that in the world of cultivation, there were indeed many wonders. Immortals who can fly by stepping on swords, boats that can fly without wings, pills that can prevent hunger and thirst, small storage bags that can hold many items, and clothes that can automatically change in size. Su Chuanyang almost immediately fell in love with this magical world. She took a deep breath, suppressed her excitement, and walked into the dining hall. The dining hall is not large, with dozens of tables inside, but no one eats here. There is a chubby old man sitting at the window. Su Chuanyang glanced and didn't see anything to eat, which was quite different from the dining hall she had imagined. She thought this dining hall would be like the restaurants in town. The chubby old man glanced at the newcomer and saw a strange face. New here. He has seen many people in this dining hall, and seeing the ugly birthmark on his face is nothing but ordinary. Su Chuanyang nodded and said, "I'm here to collect the food. May I ask if it's here to collect it?" The chubby old man lifted his eyelids and said, "New disciples can receive the Pigu pill for free within 3 years. They can receive it once a month, 1 bottle at a time, and there are 30 pills in 1 bottle. After 3 years, the Pigu pill will be purchased with a spirit stone, and 1 spirit stone can buy 2 bottles. Su Chuanyang muttered to herself, "It seems that this pai gu dan is not cheap either. A bottle and a half of spirit stones costs 6 spirit stones a year." Fortunately, the new disciples received it for free in the first 3 years, otherwise half of the 12 spirit stones distributed by the sect would have been spent just by eating them. The chubby old man knocked on the table and said, "Give me your disciple token." Su Chuanyang's heart moved and she quickly put the storage bag on her forehead, taking out the black token inside and handing it over. "Is that right?" The chubby old man took the token, played around for a moment, and quickly returned it while handing out a white jade bottle. "This is a month's share," he said. Su Chuanyang took the token and bottle, and curiously looked at the token. There were 2 strange runes on the front of the token, and 3 slightly smaller runes behind it. She suddenly remembered something and quickly flipped through the storage bag. With her sharp eyes, she saw the same 3 runes from the lower right corner of the bag. Flipping over the bag, there were 2 runes on the other side that were indistinguishable from the front of the token. The chubby old man looked at her as she flipped through the token and storage bag, and suddenly said, "Don't you recognize words? What is the character for this strange rune? No wonder she doesn't know each other anymore." Su Chuanyang shook her head and said, "I don't know. Not to mention an ugly 8-year-old girl, only Li Zheng can read in the entire Su family village. There are too many illiterate people, and the chubby old man doesn't take it seriously. There is a specialized place in the teaching hall that teaches people how to read, but those inner disciples' uncles don't teach these things. If you don't know how to read, you have to learn how to read first before you can attend the uncle's classes. Otherwise, it will be a waste of listening and you won't understand at all." Su Chuanyang's heart tightened. It seemed that she had to learn Chinese characters first, otherwise she wouldn't even understand the lessons, let alone practice. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Teaching Hall Literacy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Teaching Hall Literacy. Thank you for informing me, Uncle. Su Chuanyang smiled gratefully. The chubby old man waved his hand and said, "Since you have joined the Xiaoyao sect, don't call me uncle. I entered the sect earlier than you. I am a little older than you, and my surname is Zhao. You can call me Zhao senior brother. These news are not worth much, as anyone who has been outside for several years knows." Although Zhao, the steward, said these things were not worth mentioning, Su Chuanyang still remembered this favor. She was a newcomer and didn't understand anything, so it was rare for anyone to be willing to mention her. After taking a Pai Gu Dan, Su Chuanyang put away the token and the white jade bottle and asked curiously, "Senior brother Zhao, are there any worldly foods in this dietary hall?" Zhao, the steward, shook his head and said, "Eating too much of the common grains and miscellaneous grains can actually hinder our cultivation, so we don't have them here. But when you improve your cultivation in the future and hunt monsters, you can take them to our side to deal with. They can also be eaten by cultivators. Eating too much can also enhance your cultivation." Upon learning that there was no earthly food, Su Chuanyang felt a bit regretful and expected it. Sure enough, the food of immortals is different. This is the world of immortals, and she must adapt to it. As for the monsters mentioned by Manager Zhao, she felt that they were still too far away from her. After thanking Manager Zhao again, Su Chuanyang left the dining hall and walked towards the direction of the teaching hall. The teaching hall is not far from the dining hall, and Su Chuanyang walked for a quarter of an hour to arrive. But at the entrance of the teaching hall, there was a lively crowd of half-aged children. Looking at it, there were many people inside who were familiar to each other, including those who came by flying boat with Su Chuanyang. There are also many fresh faces who wear the same Xiaoyao sect outer door clothing. Su Chuanyang quickly stepped forward upon seeing this and mixed into the crowd. A frail man walked out of the hall and said in a deep voice, "Silence." Although his voice was not loud, it spread to everyone's ears, and the disciples quieted down. The thin and weak man nodded in satisfaction and said, "Those who can read can go directly to the second floor to listen to Master Jianji's classes. New disciples can attend classes for free for the first 3 years. If they want to attend classes again 3 years later, they need to pay a spirit stone. By paying a spirit stone, they can attend classes for a month. When Uncle Zhuji gives a lecture, please be honest. If you offend Uncle Zhuji from the inner sect, I won't be able to save you either." Seeing everyone nodded obediently, he continued calmly, "I am the external steward of the teaching hall. You can ask me any questions related to the teaching hall. My surname is Chui, so you can call me Senior Brother Chui." "Senior Brother Chui, what should we do if we don't know how to read?" someone immediately asked. Senior Brother Chui glanced at the person and said, "If you don't know how to read, you can practice writing on the first floor. In addition, there are some public courses on the common knowledge of the cultivation world on the first floor. You can understand by attending a few more classes. The first floor of the teaching hall is permanently open to disciples of the external sect for free. However, if you have to learn things from the first floor for several years, I advise you to pack up your things and get rid of them as soon as possible, so as not to waste the resources of the sect in vain. Everyone looked cold and finally arrived at the world of immortals. They didn't want to be kicked out. When Su Chuanyang heard that there was a class on the first floor where she could learn Chinese characters, she secretly noted it down. Senior brother Chui pointed to a black boulder at the door and said, "When you come to class, you just need to register your token on this stone. Your name and remaining learning time will be automatically displayed here." As he spoke, senior brother Chui put his token on top, and soon 2 lines of words appeared on the black boulder. The literate person whispered, "Chui Li, the remaining study time. 3 years. Senior brother Chui nodded and said, "During my 3 years as a steward in the teaching hall, I was able to attend classes here for free, which is also one of the benefits of being a steward. Alright, don't surround yourself here, come on in. I just want to advise you, even if you are already literate, it's best to finish the first floor's cultivation knowledge class before going to the second floor, so as not to violate the taboo of cultivation by talking nonsense. To the east is the literacy classroom, and to the west is the common sense classroom. If it comes from a cultivation family, these common sense things don't need to be learned anymore." After speaking, Chui Li put away his token and happily went up to the second floor. One by one, new disciples eagerly took out their tokens and registered them on a giant stone before entering the teaching hall. Most people stayed on the first floor and followed the guidance of senior brother Chui to the corresponding teaching room, with only a few people from the cultivation family proudly walking towards the second floor. Su Chuanyang discovered that the person named Qi Haoji had gone straight up to the second floor. She was secretly surprised that he was actually from that immortal cultivation family, and the identity and background of the little girl he followed were probably even more complicated. Su Chuanyang stood at the back, waiting for everyone to enter. She carefully took out the black token and placed it on the boulder, imitating it. Soon, 2 lines of text appeared on the boulder, indicating successful registration. After putting away the token, there was an indescribable feeling in her heart, and from today on, she was about to start literacy. In Shujia village, only Li Zheng knows the characters, but they are the most basic in the world of immortals. Su Chuanyang walked to the east courtyard and saw people entering the teaching room one after another. Each teaching room existed separately and could only accommodate 1 disciple to study. After the disciples enter the teaching room, the light outside the room will light up, indicating that there is already someone inside. After Su Chuanyang understood, she found an unmanned teaching room, opened the door, and walked in. In the classroom, there was a small room with a table and chairs, paper and pens on the table. There was also a metal ball-shaped object on the table. As the door to the classroom was closed, the metal ball emitted a red light and slowly took off. Even though she had seen many immortal methods in the past few days, Su Chuanyang was still startled and took several steps back. A sound without emotional fluctuations came from the metal ball. "I am a puppet who specializes in teaching new disciples. Let's start the enlightenment teaching now. You can adjust the learning progress by rotating the button." As its words fell, something even more magical happened. A simple rune emerged above the metal sphere, and to the right of the Chinese character was a blue sky. At the same time, the sound of the metal ball rang out again. Tian, meaning sky, can also be used to record time. The sun rises and the moon sets in one day, with 12 hours in a day. As the metal ball is narrated, the image above also begins to change. In the originally blue sky, a golden sun rises and sets, and then the sky darkens. The moon slowly rises and sets again. Su Chuanyang's eyes lit up, and it turned out that the simpler rune was the character, Tian. With the explanation and drawing of the metal ball, those complex and difficult runes are not difficult to understand at all. Su Chuanyang calmed down and sat on the chair. Under the guidance of the metal ball, she picked up a pen and began to learn. The same scene is almost performed in every teaching room. With the explanation of this metal ball and the fun and interesting scenes, the new disciples only find it not difficult to read, and they all start learning eagerly. Soon, these disciples mastered the rules. When this metal ball called puppet gives a lecture, it usually lasts for 1 hour at a time, and then stops for half an hour. This is to help these new disciples remember the newly learned characters, and if they are tired of learning, they can also rest and adjust. If you want to start or end early, you can also clear the button on the rotating puppet to choose to temporarily start or adjust the progress. In Su Chuanyang's teaching room, the metal ball had just finished an hour of class when she saw her fingers gently twist the button. The little puppet, which had just started resting, was forced to open again. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Xiaoyao Jue. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Xiaoyao Jue. Su Chuanyang stayed in the classroom for a whole day until it was completely dark before she regained her senses. It turned out that time had passed so quickly without realizing it. She had originally planned to go back to the dormitory, but when she looked at the map, it would take at least 2 to 3 hours to go back, which would take 5 or 6 hours to spend on the road. Not to mention that it's already dark now and she's not familiar with the road, so it only takes her a lot more time to come back to the circuit. A day lasts for 12 hours, except for 3 hours of sleep and time spent on the road. There are only 3 hours left for literacy. 3 hours of study time may seem like a lot, but it's definitely not enough. After all, while she was on her way, others could spend more time studying and practicing. She was already widened by others due to her lack of literacy, and we must not let the gap widen. Su Chuanyang deeply knew that although she had entered the Xiaoyao sect, her cultivation talent was only average, and there was still a lot to learn. Not only compared to those disciples from the inner sect, but also the new disciples from the outer sect who came in at the same time as her, many of whom were literate, and even several people from the cultivation family had already gone up to the second floor to listen to the lectures of the inner sect master. For example, that Qi Haoji. Although the little girl did not trouble herself again after entering the cabin, Su Chuanyang felt a sense of urgency, always feeling that this matter was not so easy to pass. She must put in more effort to narrow the gap between her and those people. With a grit of her teeth, Su Chuanyang made a bold decision and decided not to go back and sleep directly in the teaching room. Although she is only 8 years old, poverty and hunger make her mature and sensible much earlier than her peers. Moreover, since childhood, Su Chuanyang has been carrying a reputation due to her ugly appearance, which has also given her a tenacity of not accepting defeat. She is like a wild grass. Even though she comes from a humble background, she has astonishing vitality. She wants to catch up with the gap with those people in the shortest possible time. Su Chuanyang wakes up at midnight every day, cleans her back in the backyard of the teaching hall, and begins a new day of learning. When hungry, she would take a pai gu dan. When tired, she would lie on the table and take a nap. With her amazing willpower and learning ability, she quickly absorbed new knowledge until it was completely dark at midnight. It was only then that she fell asleep in the classroom with exhaustion. The next day, it was the same cycle as the previous day. This kind of life may be dull and boring for others, but for her, it is nothing more than a beautiful dream. After all, when she was in Xujia village, Su Chuanyang woke up earlier than chickens and slept later than dogs every day. She had to do farm work all day and couldn't eat enough all day. Compared to the current life where she can learn skills without starving, she doesn't feel any hardship at all, but enjoys it. On that day, Su Chuanyang still stayed in the small teaching room, and the puppet little ball in front of her was tirelessly explaining knowledge. After speaking for an hour, the little ball still fell silent as usual. Su Chuanyang did not rotate the button as usual to let the little ball continue teaching, but pressed the pause button and took out several books from the storage bag. After this period of effort, Su Chuanyang's progress was rapid, and she could almost recognize some commonly used words. She recognized that these books were respectively called The Rules of Xiaoyao Disciples, Xiaoyao Jue, and Complete Encyclopedia of the Cultivation Realm. Su Chuanyang thought for a moment and first took the book, The Code of Conduct for Xiaoyao Disciples, to read. There aren't many rules in the Xiaoyao sect, so Su Chuanyang took a short while to roughly read this thin book. She can understand most of the characters, and even the ones she doesn't recognize have a rough idea of their meaning. She put away this book with both pride and emotion in her heart. These days of hard work have not been in vain, she has truly become literate. If my parents and brother found out, they would definitely be happy for her too. They probably don't even know that if they want to become immortals, they still need to be literate. Su Chuanyang smiled and flipped through the thickest encyclopedia of the cultivation world. Just looking at the table of contents, Su Chuanyang knew that this book cannot be read all at once. The table of contents alone has more than 10 pages, containing a lot of knowledge about the cultivation world. However, having a detailed directory also has an advantage. If you encounter something you don't understand in the future, it will be very convenient to look it up. I casually flipped through the contents of the book, and as expected, they were all things that Su Chuanyang had never heard of before. Each item is accompanied by corresponding illustrations, and even the details are clearly depicted, truly deserving of being an encyclopedia. Shaking her head, Su Chuanyang also put away the complete encyclopedia of the cultivation realm. The only book left outside was the Xiaoyao Jue. This is the mental technique that external disciples need to learn. Suppressing her excitement, Su Chuanyang gently opened the page of the book. Being carefree in the leisure of the world, and having one's mind at ease, taking the world as one's own. Every day, one's home is free and unrestrained, free and carefree, and can achieve longevity. Su Chuanyang blinked her eyes. She knew every word in it, but when combined, she couldn't understand a single word. It seems that only by going to the second floor and listening to the lectures and explanations of those inner martial uncles can we understand the meaning of these words. A familiar sense of hunger came, and Su Chuanyang simply put away Xiaoyao Jue and skillfully took out a white jade bottle from her storage bag, only to find that she couldn't even pour out a EP1-10. Su Chuanyang finally realized that she had been studying in the classroom for a whole month. It's time to go to the dining hall to receive the EP1-10. Coincidentally, she can recognize the characters quite well. Starting this afternoon, let's go to the West Courtyard to listen to the common sense class. After planning what to do next, Su Chuanyang walked out of the teaching hall and towards the dining hall. The dining hall remained as deserted as ever, and Steward Zhao sat in the hall board. When he saw someone approaching, his chubby face showed a slight smile and said, "It's you." Obviously, he still remembers Su Chuanyang. After all, this girl's appearance is also very special. Su Chuanyang, who had been studying in the teaching hall for a month, was a little happy to see an acquaintance, revealing 2 dimples. "Hello, senior brother Zhao," she said, "You girl, you look a bit more energetic than last time, and your face has also turned quite rosy." Manager Zhao looked at her up and down. The last time he saw this girl, her face was yellow and thin, with a severely malnourished appearance. Even her hair was sparse and pitiful, and her eyes were surprisingly bright. Seeing her again this time, she has grown much better, no longer the refugee-like appearance she had before. Su Chuanyang has been busy reading for the past month and has never paid attention to her appearance. At first, when she heard Manager Zhao say this, she couldn't believe it. She just thought he was saying polite things and smiled as she handed over the token. After receiving the token registration, Manager Zhao handed over the token and a new bottle of EP1-10. "How are you doing with literacy?" Although literacy is important, cultivation is even more important. If you can almost memorize the Xiaoyao Jue, why don't you go to the second floor for a lesson earlier? I've heard that several of your new disciples have already infused qi into their bodies. A few days ago Su Chuanyang was taken aback by the fact that she had only learned Chinese characters in the past month. Surprisingly, others had already successfully infused qi into their bodies and officially embarked on the path of cultivation. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Founding Master's Lecture. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Founding Master's Lecture. Although Su Chuanyang does not understand the specific meaning of introducing qi into the body, she had heard the leader's senior brother mention as early as on the flying boat that this is the first step for everyone to embark on the path of cultivation, and it is not so easy to cross. Those with poor talent and low comprehension may even take 6 months to succeed. After thanking Zhao Guan, Su Chuanyang hurriedly grabbed the token and Pigu Dan, and ran towards the teaching hall. She had to finish the common sense lesson earlier. After Su Chuanyang returned to the teaching hall, she plunged into the west courtyard and began listening to the common sense class. In terms of fun, these common sense classes are much more interesting than literacy classes. The courses cover some very basic things, combined with teaching visuals, which are simple and easy to understand. It was also in the west courtyard that, through a small metal ball, the world of cultivation gradually revealed the mysterious veil to Su Chuanyang. After 7 full days, Su Chuanyang finally finished listening to all the common sense lessons. Her eyes lit up, and she was still somewhat unsatisfied. I didn't expect there to be so many novel things in the world of immortals. In addition to the mental techniques we must learn, we can also choose cultivation techniques for cultivation, and there are various spiritual tools, some can attack, some can defend. In addition, you can also choose to focus on spiritual cultivation, puppets, formations, seal script, alchemy, and animal control for targeted learning. As long as you master your major, you won't have to worry about future tribute tasks. Su Chuanyang took a deep breath and suppressed the excitement in her heart. She hasn't officially started practicing yet. Only after embarking on the path of cultivation will this magical world officially open to her. What she needs to do next is to go to the second floor to listen to the class and breathe in as soon as possible. The next morning, Su Chuanyang walked up the second floor with excitement. The teaching room on the second floor is much larger than the first floor and can accommodate hundreds of people at the same time. Except for the heart method teaching room that guides new disciples to practice, the other teaching rooms are written with words such as spirit plant, beast control, technique, seal script, refining tools, etc., all taught by the senior brother of the Inner Sex Foundation building. Su Chuanyang withdrew her gaze and walked into the mind method teaching room. After entering the teaching room, to Su Chuanyang's surprise, there were already 2 or 3 figures inside. They sat cross-legged in place and saw someone coming in. They just turned their heads and took a glance, then withdrew their gaze and continued to sit with their eyes closed. Su Chuanyang's face was slightly moved. It seemed that while she was working hard, the others were not idle either. She found a corner, closed her eyes and sat cross-legged like a few others, waiting for the arrival of the inner martial uncle. After an unknown amount of time, Su Chuanyang was dozing off in a daze when a loud noise woke her up. I saw that the teaching room was already filled with people at some point, all of whom crowded towards the door and window, stretching their necks to look out. Su Chuanyang followed everyone's gaze and looked out. When she saw the scene outside clearly, she fell asleep and ran away without a trace. Surprisingly, a man in white came from outside with a sword. She had seen this scene in the common sense class at the West Campus, but didn't expect to see it so quickly in reality. The one who came with the sword was the founder of the inner gate, but after jumping off the sword, he did not come over. Instead, he entered a nearby teaching room with the name "You Beast" written on it. Not long after the arrival of the inner master of the Beast Control course, several figures came wielding swords. One of them jumped off the flying sword and walked towards their teaching room. The new disciples saw Uncle Zhuji walking over and quickly ran to their seats, but their expressions couldn't hide their excitement. Today's speaker is Uncle Gu. It only took Uncle Gu 30 years from practicing Qi to building a foundation. Even in the inner gate, this speed is extremely fast. Uncle Gu's class is very vivid, from simple to profound, and today was not in vain. Silence, Uncle Gu is about to start. If he violates discipline in his class, he will be kicked out of the classroom. Su Chuanyang heard the discussions around her, and only then did she know that this martial uncle's surname was Gu, and his cultivation talent was extraordinary. Before she could listen carefully, she saw the disciples sitting up one by one with serious and upright expressions. Subconsciously, she sat even straighter and perked up her ears. Gu Yuanan glanced at the classroom and nodded in satisfaction. Now let's start our class. Last time, we talked about the existence of qi in heaven and earth, which generates all things. The meaning is that there is spiritual energy in heaven and earth, and all things are born from spiritual energy, but spiritual energy is invisible and intangible. Only when we bring energy into our body can we feel it during cultivation. And spiritual energy is not a single substance, it has attributes. When you test it, you all know your spiritual root attributes, right? Gu Yuan paused for a moment, his gaze swept over the disciples inside the room, and when they nodded, he continued speaking. In addition to the 5 common attributes of gold, wood, water, fire, and earth, as well as the 3 mutated attributes of wind, thunder, and ice, there are also some other attributes of spiritual energy. However, I won't go into too much detail here. You just need to remember these 8 attributes now. When you practice, you can attract spiritual energy from heaven and earth. Generally speaking, you will be more likely to attract spiritual energy that is consistent with the spiritual meridian. For example, a person with the 3 spiritual roots of gold, wood, and water will attract the majority of spiritual energy while practicing, and the other 5 will be even fewer. So, isn't it that disciples of the 4 spirit roots and 5 spirit roots can actually attract more types of spiritual energy? A disciple asked. Gu Yuanan glanced at the disciple who asked the question and said, "Not bad. If you practice the 5 spirit roots, you will attract the 5 spiritual energies of gold, wood, water, fire, and earth. However, the speed of cultivation will not increase due to the multiple types of spiritual energy attracted. On the contrary, it is precisely because disciples of the 5 spirit roots need to harmonize the 5 types of spiritual energy during cultivation, which is actually the slowest. And the cultivation speed of single spiritual root disciples is the fastest because they only absorb a single spiritual energy without the need to harmonize it. Upon hearing this, the disciples suddenly realized that both the disciples of the single spirit root and the double spirit root had entered the inner gate. They do not need to harmonize spiritual energy or have relatively little spiritual energy to harmonize, so their cultivation speed is much faster than others. Some disciples showed a dejected expression, most of whom were disciples of the 4 or even 5 spirit roots. Many disciples of the 3 spirit roots are secretly grateful, although they are not as good as single spirit roots and double spirit roots, they are not too bad. The disciples of the 5 spirit roots do not need to underestimate themselves. After all, in the study of magic, the 5 spirit roots have incomparable advantages and can learn the magic related to the 5 elements more quickly. Gu Yuanan gathered everyone's expressions in his eyes and spoke calmly. Although the 5 spirit roots cultivators progress slowly, if they can simultaneously master the 5 spiritual qi-related spells, they can have a significant advantage in practical combat. It's just that the disciples of the 5 spirit roots had difficult cultivation in the early stages, and few could persist until the foundation was built. But most of the 5 spiritual roots cultivators who can build foundations have combat abilities far superior to other cultivators. In short, there are countless opportunities on the path of cultivating immortality, and there are also many disciples of the 5 spirit roots who have immortal connections. The founder of our Xiaoyao sect is a powerful 5 spirit roots cultivator. End of this chapter. Chapter 7 Cultivation. Entering a meditation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Cultivation. Entering a meditation. It turns out that Grandmaster is actually a 5 spirit root cultivator. Although the cultivation of the 5 spirit roots is slow, once you learn the techniques well, you will be skilled in fighting. Everyone was in an uproar, especially the disciples of the 5 spirit roots, their expressions uplifted one by one. Although the cultivation of the 5 spirit roots has slowed down, as long as one works hard, there is still a glimmer of hope in building a foundation. And after building the foundation, it can be much stronger than fellow cultivators of the same rank. However, before building the foundation, it's best for you outsiders to spend more time on improving your cultivation. After all, cultivation is the foundation of everything. Gu Yuanan said solemnly, that's all for the topic related to spiritual energy. The focus is now on how to balance and absorb spiritual energy. Unconsciously, the 2-hour teaching time had already ended. After Gu Yuanan finished his lecture, he left with his sword. Everyone looked at the departing figure, feeling that they had benefited a lot and were still unsatisfied. Some people were reluctant to leave and sat in place, beginning to feel spiritual energy. Su Chuanyang thought for a moment, but she didn't linger too much in the classroom. She returned to the east courtyard on the first floor, the teaching room where she had lived for a month. Uncle Gu said that it is best to practice in a quiet, secluded, and spiritual place. Although the teaching room on the second floor is spacious, there are too many people, and the environment is not as good as the independent teaching room on the first floor. After re-entering the teaching room, Su Chuanyang paused her teaching puppet and sat cross-legged, feeling the spiritual energy of heaven and earth as Uncle Gu had said. Su Chuanyang placed her breath at the slowest and lightest, silently reciting the mind technique of the Xiaoyao technique in her heart while feeling the flow of spiritual energy throughout her body. Several hours passed, but she didn't feel anything. Su Chuanyang opened her eyes, feeling somewhat disappointed. She tried very hard to feel it, but couldn't feel any spiritual energy. As Gu Shishu clearly said, feeling spiritual energy is the most basic step, which is not difficult. As long as the heart is calm enough, it can be felt. Is it because her heart is not calm enough? Su Chuanyang vaguely realized the key to the problem. Although she had been working hard to feel it and the surroundings were quiet, she always wanted to quickly feel the spiritual energy in her heart, as if she was too impatient realizing the problem. Su Chuanyang took a deep breath, adjusted her mindset, and resumed meditation. This time, she no longer thought about how to feel the spiritual energy, only slowed down her breathing, closed her eyes, and remained focused. As her breath grew longer, Su Chuanyang felt her surroundings becoming quieter and her mind becoming clearer. She felt as if she had lost weight and was floating lightly. As the meditation progressed, this mysterious state continued to deepen. Not long after, she even saw a small blue dot. Su Chuanyang's heart was shaken, and this small blue dot was the spiritual energy of water attribute. She felt it. However, as her mind trembled, the little blue dot disappeared from sight, and she also withdrew from that mysterious state of concentration. Su Chuanyang opened her eyes with some remorse. She knew that it was because she felt too excited by the spiritual energy that scared the little blue dot away. Calm down, calm down. Feeling that spiritual energy is nothing at all. After blending and absorbing the 3 types of spiritual energy into the body, use mind techniques to guide spiritual energy cultivation for a week before truly introducing energy into the body. She is just about to learn how to settle down, seeing a bit of spiritual energy. It's still a long way from being able to attract energy into her body. Su Chuanyang controlled her emotions and resumed her composure. Su Chuanyang's life has become more regular. Every morning, she goes to the Mind Method teaching room to listen to Master Zhu Ji's lectures. At other times, she returns to the independent teaching room on the first floor for meditation practice. Every time she goes to class, she deliberately finds the most corner position, and coupled with the fact that no one dares to make mistakes in Uncle Jianji's class, it is also very safe. This kind of day lasted for a week, and within this week, she still couldn't successfully induce qi into her body, but when she entered, she could feel more spiritual energy. Starting from the day before yesterday, she tried to reconcile spiritual energy, but it was more difficult to reconcile spiritual energy, and there has not been much progress so far. After a week of class, I have finished listening to the mental techniques related to the Xiaoyao Jue. Going to the class again won't be of much help in getting qi into the body. Su Chuanyang has decided to skip the class from tomorrow and focus on getting qi into the body first. After making up her mind, Su Chuanyang took out a map and prepared to return to her dormitory. Although living in the teaching hall is convenient for practice, there are still many inconveniences in life. Su Chuanyang walked out of the lecture hall towards the direction of the dormitory and passed by the lecture hall on the way. Seeing a large circle of people gathered around the lecture pavilion from afar, she suddenly remembered that on the 1st and 15th day of the Lunar New Year, Elder Jindan would come to the lecture pavilion to give lectures, and all disciples of the outer sect could attend. That's Elder Jindan. The founder of the inner sect is already very powerful, able to fly with swords. Elder Jindan is much more powerful than the founder. Without hesitation, Su Chuanyang walked towards the direction of the lecture pavilion. The inside and outside of the lecture hall were already surrounded by water, and Su Chuanyang arrived late. She couldn't even squeeze into the door of the lecture hall, but there were many people around who, like her, couldn't squeeze in and stood outside respectfully. Elder Jindan hasn't arrived yet, and someone started whispering gossip about the inner sect. A thin and weak man whispered, "Have you heard that this year's inner gate has a remarkable genius named Xiaoyao Jue? It is said that she is an ice-type single spiritual root, and the purity of her spiritual root is even rarer, reaching 90%. Hiss. It's really fake, then this must have been accepted as a disciple by the Golden Core ancestor, right?" The thin and weak man who had previously spoken gave a mysterious smile, but shook his head and said, "No. No." The others were surprised. "No, isn't it? With such good cultivation qualifications, it's impossible not to be appreciated." That's right, a few years ago, what kind of Huang Fusion was still the fire wood double spirit root? The highest purity of the fire spirit root was only 80%, and it was also taken as a disciple by the Dan Peak Golden Dan ancestor. There is also Wei Dao, who has recently joined the inner sect this year. He has dual spiritual roots of gold and fire, with a purity of up to 78%. As soon as he entered the sect, he was favored by the golden pill ancestor of the refining peak. If someone really has a single ice spirit root, their purity can still reach 90%. The ancestors of the golden elixir must not break their heads. That's right, you shouldn't be deceiving us with words, right? Faced with questioning from others, the thin and weak man's face remained relaxed, even with a hint of a smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, I only said that the Golden Core ancestor did not collect the genius of the ice spirit root, but I did not say that the Yuaning ancestor also confiscated it." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone else was shocked. What, actually being favored by Yuaning ancestor? I have been in the Xiaoyao sect for 56 years, and for the first time, I heard of someone being taken as a disciple by Yuaning ancestor. It is rumored that there are 2 supreme elders with the cultivation of Yuaning in our Xiaoyao sect. They have been focused on the Tao and have been ignoring external affairs for a long time. They will not even leave the sect until the sect's life and death are in danger. Unexpectedly, they will also accept disciples. Alas, I only hate that our spiritual root talents are too poor. Not to mention the elder Yuaning, even the elder Jindan doesn't appreciate our qualifications. Everyone was discussing and expressing envy for their talented disciples and helplessness towards their own qualifications. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Dormitory. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Dormitory. Su Chuanyang listened throughout the entire process and was very happy for De Wuge when she learned that he had entered the inner gate and even been taken in by the golden elixir elder of the refining peak. As for the other 2 inner geniuses, she just secretly jotted down these 2 names and ignored the others. Suddenly, the surrounding discussions were as quiet and terrifying as pressing the pause button. If Su Chuanyang had noticed, she looked up into the sky and saw an old man sitting on a huge gourd rushing towards her. The old man was dressed in a golden Taoist robe, with a fairy-like demeanor and backbone, and at a glance, he knew he was a divine expert. He arrived at the top of the lecture pavilion and did not fall down. He still sat on the gourd, his gaze fading as he scanned the entire room. Everyone felt that the gaze was so heavy that they couldn't even breathe loudly, and they were all prepared. The old man in the golden robe withdrew his gaze and his calm voice spread around. I am a cultivator of the golden elixir at the refining peak. Today, I will only discuss issues related to refining. Below, I will explain the analysis of first-level refining. Originally, Elder Jindan would preach the scriptures every half-month, and the elder from the same peak would preach the scriptures from that peak. The elder who came today is from the refining tool peak, and the scriptures he talks about are naturally related to refining tools. Su Chuanyang's eyes were dazed when she heard it. Although the elder of the golden elixirs, analysis of first-level refining tools, was excellent, the key was that she couldn't understand it at all. She carefully looked around and saw that all the disciples were fully focused on listening. Even those who didn't understand, they all put on a serious listening posture and had to take it seriously. Su Chuanyang secretly began to ponder in her heart. It seemed that what Elder Jindan was talking about was too profound and far from what she could hear now. Instead of spending time listening to this, it was better to go back and continue trying to harmonize spiritual energy. She had previously felt regretful for missing 2 elder sermons, but now it seems that there is nothing to be ashamed of. However, Elder Jindan has already started preaching, and she cannot leave without permission. She can only wait for this elder to finish speaking before returning to the dormitory. 2 hours later, Elder Jindan finished his lecture and sat directly on the gourd before leaving. Watching the small black dots in the sky getting smaller and smaller, Su Chuanyang also breathed a sigh of relief and quickly ran away. These 2 hours were simply torture for her. Not only couldn't understand, but also had to pretend to understand. However, this trip was not entirely without gains, at least for a long time. She will not think of coming to the lecture hall again. Walking all the way towards the dormitory, it became increasingly remote, and the latter half of the road was deserted and uninhabited. If it weren't for the map of Xiaoyao sect still in her hand, Su Chuanyang would have thought she had walked out of the sect. After walking for 3 whole hours, Su Chuanyang finally arrived at her destination, which was a dilapidated small wooden house. This small wooden house hasn't been inhabited for a long time, with a big hole in the roof and no windows. It's even more dilapidated than her home in Shujia village. Can I stay here? Su Chuanyang was very skeptical, and she even thought that she might as well live in the teaching hall. However, at the thought that it would take another 3 hours to walk back, she ultimately suppressed this idea. Moreover, although the teaching room can be occupied, living there for a long time is not that easy. Su Chuanyang obediently pushed open the door, but before she could exert any force, the door unexpectedly collapsed, lifting a cloud of dust from the boss. Looking inside again, there was nothing else but a bed and a table. Even these 2 pieces of furniture were in a state of disrepair, and Su Chuanyang had no doubt that with just a gentle force, they would shatter. Well, it seems that she should sleep on the floor. Anyway, she has been sleeping very skillfully these days. Su Chuanyang suffered from a small face. Fortunately, the uniform issued by the sect can automatically prevent dust and cold. Otherwise, she would never be able to sleep on the floor every day. Leaving the room, Su Chuanyang looked around and had to find the water source first. Although there is a Pigu Dan who does not need to drink water, not to mention that cleaning the house requires water. Although she has been living in the teaching hall these days and insists on using water to clean her body every day, she has not taken a shower for a long time. But at first glance, where is there any water on this bare mountain? Su Chuanyang shook her head helplessly. It seemed that these 6 spirit stones were not easy to save. It's best to find water before dark and clean up the house. Fortunately, although Su Chuanyang has not yet been able to bring qi into her body, her daily cultivation is not without results. At least she can clearly feel that her physical strength has improved a lot, and after walking for so long, she did not feel too tired. After a brief rest, Su Chuanyang opened the map and began searching for areas nearby that may have water sources. There is no need to pay attention to the other side of the mountain. She has not forgotten what Manager Zhang said. If she really encounters a monster, with her current abilities, it will definitely be a gift. After identifying several areas with potential water sources, Su Chuanyang set off. There is still an hour until dark. I hope to find the water source as soon as possible. Su Chuanyang also grew up in a rural family since childhood, and was accustomed to going up and down the river in the wild. This had to be replaced by other 8-year-old children, who even dared not run around on the mountains. However, Su Chuanyang's luck was really bad. She had already rushed as fast as possible, but there was no water in the places she went to. Watching the sky turn completely dark, if you don't go back tonight, you might end up camping in the mountains and forests. However, thinking of the dilapidated wooden house on the mountaintop, Su Chuanyang shook her head in silence. Living in that room, she had to worry about whether the wall would collapse if she fell asleep at night, and it was better to camp in the mountains and forests. At present, there is only the last place that may have a water source left. Su Chuanyang opened the map and looked at the location she had circled, which was already very close to the back mountain. Su Chuanyang closed the map and planned to go tomorrow. Why don't we find a cave to make ends meet tonight? According to the terrain displayed on the map, the area to the south is covered with mountains, and you should be able to find caves. As expected, not long after walking south, the terrain became more complex. Fortunately, at this moment, the moon rose and the faint moonlight illuminated the way ahead. However, the mountain road was steep and difficult to navigate, and even with moonlight lighting, there were many inconveniences. In addition, Su Chuanyang was young and weak, and had to work hard all day during the day. In no time, she slipped under her feet and fell weightless. Su Chuanyang was taken aback. After realizing it, she realized that she had fallen into the gap between the mountains. However, she didn't expect that the gap was so deep, and falling from such a high place would probably mean her death. Is she going to die unjustly before she can embark on the path of cultivation? Still a day of collecting and collecting tickets, all kinds of tickets are throwing at me, love you, 3, end of this chapter. Chapter 9. Trapped. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Trapped. Su Chuanyang didn't have time to feel sad in her heart, but her whole body was enveloped by the cold liquid rushing from all sides. It turned out that there was actually a pond below. She didn't actually die. Su Chuanyang, who had saved her life, almost froze for a while before she realized it. She quickly held her breath and floated up to the surface, swimming towards the shore. Under the faint moonlight, Su Chuanyang could only vaguely see the surrounding scene. This is a completely natural cave, and in the center of the cave is a small pool of water. She just fell from the gap above the pool. Just looking at the height, the gap between the mountain and the water pool is about 7 or 8 zhang high, and it may be difficult to climb out by manpower. I just hope there are other exits in this cave. Su Chuanyang shook her head and suppressed her thoughts. The sky is too dark and she is also tired. It's better to explore again tomorrow. It can be considered a blessing in disguise. Although she stumbled and fell into the depths of the mountain, she not only found a natural cave to temporarily shelter in, but also found a water source, which saved her a lot of trouble. On the second day at Mao.00, Su Chuanyang woke up on time. At this moment, the sky had just become translucent, and the sun had not yet risen. The cave was also blurry and impossible to explore. She couldn't sleep and didn't want to waste time, so she started sitting cross-legged. I don't know if it's her illusion, but she found that after settling down today, the amount of spiritual energy attracted was almost 3 times that of usual. Su Chuanyang only had a slight doubt before putting this matter aside, and meditation requires concentration. She closed her eyes and began to harmonize the spiritual energy around her. The blue water spiritual energy is the most obedient, and it blends quickly with the green wood spiritual energy. However, once the yellow earth spiritual energy is added to these two types of spiritual energy, they will dissipate instantly. Su Chuanyang was not discouraged, she had encountered such a situation countless times before. Still patiently starting over. Finally, after countless repetitions, the spiritual energy of blue, green, and yellow fused together for the first time. Su Chuanyang calmed her mind and silently recited the martial arts, guiding the spiritual energy into her body. The spiritual energy cluster walked awkwardly all the way, but was unexpectedly introduced into the dantian. Success! Su Chuanyang opened her eyes in surprise. Although it was still a long way from the actual entry of qi into her body, this step was crucial. Next, she only needs to introduce the spiritual energy cluster into the elixir field, continuously fill it, and then use the cultivation method to guide the spiritual energy in her body to practice around the vast universe once. Just as Su Chuanyang was about to continue her cultivation with all her might, her stomach started to growl. It was only then that Su Chuanyang came to her senses. It turned out that she had spent a full half-day practicing. After practicing for so long, she didn't feel tired at all, but instead felt very energetic. Su Chuanyang took a pigu pill and prepared to explore the cave to see if there were any other exits. The mountainside is not very large, except for the small water pool and the place where she sleeps and cultivates, there is almost no other exit at all. Su Chuanyang, who had just made a breakthrough in her cultivation and was happy, immediately looked down and had no other way out, which meant she was going to be trapped in this cave. She counted the pai gu dan in her storage bag several times, and there were only 15 left. If she still couldn't leave after eating these pai gu dan, wouldn't she be trapped here and die? Su Chuanyang shuddered, a bit scared by her own thoughts. She shook her head desperately, dispelling the terrifying thought in her mind. There will definitely be a way, and there are 15 pigu pills. If you save a little, if you eat half a pill a day, you can persist for 30 days. I am young and don't consume much, so half a pill should be enough. 30 days is enough time for me to breathe air into my body. She lifted her head and glanced at the crevice in the mountain. After breathing in, she should be able to climb out, right? Su Chuanyang is not quite sure, but there is no other way now, so she can only try her best. After making up her mind, she sat cross-legged and began practicing. This cultivation lasted for a full 10 days. In addition to the necessary 3 hours of sleep every day, Su Chuanyang devoted all her time to cultivation, so her progress was also astonishingly fast. The spiritual energy in the elixir field became more and more abundant, and soon it would be full. On this day, Su Chuanyang introduced the spiritual energy cluster into the dantian and found that the dantian was completely filled. She blessed her soul and began to operate the Xiaoyao Jue, carefully guiding her spiritual energy. With the operation of the cultivation method, spiritual energy follows the spiritual meridian and travels among the 4 limbs, undergoing some kind of transformation in transformation. Su Chuanyang felt comfortable all over, and wherever spiritual energy reached, her body became warm, as if soaking in warm water. However, the warm feeling quickly disappeared and turned into intense pain. Originally, with the operation of the cultivation method, the spiritual energy gradually left the location of the spiritual pulse and swam towards deeper places. Ah! Su Chuanyang couldn't help but cry out in pain. Despite being mentally prepared, she was caught off guard by the intense pain and almost instinctively wanted to stop the operation of her mind. Just quickly, she remembered what Uncle Gu had said in the classroom. When qi is introduced into the body, there is spiritual protection in the areas it passes through at the beginning, and warmth is felt. However, as the cultivation deepens, spiritual energy will swim into more areas without spiritual protection, causing intense pain. Many people will stop practicing because they cannot bear the pain. If you stop because of pain, although it can be considered a successful introduction of qi into your body, your path of cultivation has also begun. The pain you bear is actually just spiritual energy transforming your body, and the longer you persist in this step, the greater the benefits for your future cultivation. No, you can't give up here. Su Chuanyang became ruthless and continued to use her mental methods. She was originally the daughter of a rural family, illiterate in Chinese characters. After finally obtaining the immortal fate to cultivate, she must give her all. With the passage of time, the transformation of spiritual energy on the body has become more profound, even penetrating into some meridians that have not been guided by martial arts. Su Chuanyang trembled with pain all over her body, but she gritted her teeth and refused to give up. She must persist for a longer time. Later on, her consciousness became somewhat blurred and she could no longer hold on. She tilted her head and fainted. Su Chuanyang was awakened by the foul smell. She wrinkled her nose and opened her eyes, her consciousness still lingering in the process of introducing air into her body, and she didn't know if she had succeeded. Su Chuanyang first checked her body and found that the spiritual energy in the elixir field was particularly abundant and full, and there was also a faint flow of spiritual energy throughout her body. Only then did she put her heart back into her stomach and finally succeeded. Later, she had the leisure to search for the source of the odor. But she was surprised to find that it was herself who emitted an astonishing odor. Originally, she was covered in a layer of black filth all over her body, emitting an unpleasant odor from head to toe. A little thought made Su Chuanyang understand that this was the dirty thing that came out of the back row of her body after being transformed by spiritual energy. This place was quiet and deserted, and Su Chuanyang directly removed all her clothes from her body. Suddenly, she plunged into the pool and began to wash. After washing for an hour, I finally cleaned up the annoying dirt on my body. After washing, Su Chuanyang found that she seemed much whiter than before, probably due to the spiritual energy washing away her body. Now that my spiritual energy has entered my body, I wonder if I can leave this cave, she whispered and looked up. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Building a Layer of Qi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Building a Layer of Qi. Do as you please. After putting on her clothes, Su Chuanyang began to climb. During the climbing process, she found that her body had become much more agile and lightweight after being transformed by spiritual energy. But the entrance to the mountain gap was too steep, making it difficult to climb up. She tried more than 10 times, but was unable to succeed. After another failed climb and falling into the pool, Su Chuanyang couldn't hide her disappointment. Unexpectedly, she had already drawn in air and couldn't leave here. Forget it, since I can't leave, let's continue practicing. Su Chuanyang thought for a moment and realized that although she couldn't climb out at the moment, if her cultivation had reached the level of Qi cultivation, she might have a chance. Her Pigu Dan still has 10 left and can last for 20 days. Even a genius with dual spiritual roots would find it difficult to cultivate to a level of Qi cultivation in such a short amount of time, even in 20 days. Although the concentration of spiritual energy here is much higher than that in the teaching room, the speed of cultivation is not only related to the richness of spiritual energy around us. After all, no matter how rich the spiritual energy is in heaven and earth, it takes time to absorb it into the body weight, when it comes to absorbing spiritual energy. Su Chuanyang patted her head. How could she forget that she still had a spirit stone? The spirit stone contains a large amount of spiritual energy, and these spiritual energies are different from the wandering spiritual energy in heaven and earth, which can be directly used for cultivation. If it were normal, she would definitely not be willing to take the spirit stone directly for cultivation. After all, the spirit stone has many uses, such as buying martial arts, spiritual tools, elixirs, beret plates, and so on. But now she is trapped in the mountainside, and if she can't go out for a long time, she will starve to death here. No matter how many spirit stones there are, they are useless. Su Chuanyang took the storage bag and now she doesn't need to put it close to her forehead to directly retrieve the items. She took out 2 shining stones and reluctantly touched them. Su Chuanyang grabbed the stones and started practicing directly. There is no time in the mountains, and as soon as Su Chuanyang cultivates, she loses her sense of time. After introducing qi into her body, her mental state improved compared to before, and her daily sleep time of 3 hours was compressed to 2 hours. The urgent task now is to improve one's cultivation and leave this cave as soon as possible. In a blink of an eye, 18 days passed in a blink of an eye. On this day, Su Chuanyang was still absorbing spiritual energy. She held a spiritual stone in one hand, but the originally abundant spiritual stone was now gray and looked no different from the stones on the roadside. As the last strand of spiritual energy in the spirit stone was absorbed, the spirit stone seemed unable to withstand it anymore and turned into annihilation powder. Su Chuanyang opened her eyes and a hint of excitement flashed in them, finally reaching the level of qi cultivation. Absorbing the spiritual energy from the spirit stone is indeed much faster than practicing alone. Just looking at the spirit stone that had completely turned into annihilation powder, Su Chuanyang felt a lot of pain. These are 2 big spiritual stones. A spiritual stone is even more valuable than 1,000 gold coins. She has only been practicing like this for more than 10 days, and surprisingly, her expenses have exceeded 2,000 gold coins. Su Chuanyang only felt a whirlwind, constantly caressing her chest, and it took her a long time to suppress the feeling of heartache. Well, I've used it all. Let's see what's different about practicing Qi Layer 1. Su Chuanyang clenched her small fist and a happy smile appeared on her face. Only at this moment did she behave like an 8-year-old child. Practicing 1 layer of qi can already be considered as a cultivator stepping onto the path of immortality. Su Chuanyang found that her body was even more agile. With just 1 leap, she could jump from one side of the pool to the other, and she didn't even exert any force. Not only has the body become lighter, but even the 5 senses seem to have increased significantly. Even during the day, the cave is always dim and many places are not clear to see, but after breaking through 1 layer of qi cultivation, all places can be seen clearly. Su Chuanyang looked up with full confidence. She was 9% sure that she could leave the cave. She leaped up and climbed up the steep mountain wall. Not long after, she climbed to the gap and lightly hooked her hand, leaving the cave. Finally coming out. Sooning in the long-lost sun, Su Chuanyang flattened her mouth, with an impulse to cry. Recalling these days of being trapped, she really persevered with a breath in her chest. Greedily sunbathing for an hour, Su Chuanyang jumped down and returned to the cave. Now that she can leave the cave, she is not in a hurry. Gu Shushu once said that after achieving a breakthrough in cultivation, the most important thing is to consolidate one's cultivation. If one does not consolidate their cultivation, the foundation of their cultivation may not be solid enough, and in the future, they may encounter accidents and even fall into a lower realm. She spent 2 spiritual stones to improve her cultivation, but she can't just fall off easily, otherwise she will lose a lot. After 3 full days, feeling that her cultivation had completely stabilized, Su Chuanyang was satisfied and stopped practicing. She left the cave and headed straight for the diet hall. This time, Su Chuanyang only took 2 hours to reach the dining hall, and her speed was almost twice as fast as before. The steward Zhao of the diet hall is unusually busy, skillfully handling a dead wolf. This is the demon beast, the wind wolf. In the later stage of qi cultivation, manager Zhao nuzzled his lips. It was those people who hunted it. They entrusted me to help clean it up. Although Zhao Guanshi holds a superior position as the steward of the diet hall, he is naturally greedy and enjoys eating. The disciples are not limited by their cultivation level. If they hunt any monsters, they can take them to his side and ask him to help them deal with it. He will collect a certain amount of animal meat as a reward. Su Chuanyang followed the direction pointed out by manager Zhao and saw 3 imposing men sitting in the dining hall, capable of hunting monsters that could reach the later stage of qi cultivation. Their cultivation level was definitely not lower than the 7th level of qi cultivation. Zhao, the steward, had something to say, so Su Chuanyang didn't say much. She withdrew next month's Pigu Dan in advance and left the diet hall with 2 bottles of Pigu Dan, heading towards the Chuangong Pavilion. After practicing qi and entering the body, new disciples can enter the Chuangong Pavilion once and choose 2 low-level techniques for free. After entering the Chuanjing Pavilion, I didn't expect to meet an acquaintance inside, Qi Haoji. This Qi Haoji is the person who followed the little girl in Chinese attire, but later on, when the domineering girl entered the inner door, he stayed at the outer door. Su Chuanyang remembers that Qi Haoji was one of the first people to attend classes on the 2nd floor outside the teaching hall. As early as when she was still literate, he had already infused his energy into her body. Unexpectedly, it was not until today that he came to the teaching hall to select techniques. "It's you." Qi Haoji was also surprised to see Su Chuanyang, and his impression of her can be said to be very profound. Not to mention that when she was on the flying boat, she was targeted by Huang Fuyao and there were still people who helped her. Later, when Zhang Donglai was in charge, Su Chuanyang's performance was also very impressive. Moreover, the hideous and prominent red birthmark below Su Chuanyang's right eye is absolutely unforgettable. Although she looked much better now than before, she still looked ugly in his eyes. Su Chuanyang saw Qi Haoji, but only regarded him as heir. She walked to the lower-level magic to prepare for selecting the magic. Qi Haoji furrowed his brows and followed her to the spell selection area. "How could you also introduce Qi into your body?" "No." He felt her breath for a moment, his face changed, and he said incredulously, "You have already practiced 1 layer of Qi." End of this chapter.